Hi everyone. Wanted to make another intro video here for week 5. So welcome to week 5 of Composition 1. Just going to give you a bit of an overview of some of the things that we're doing this week. Before I get into that, one thing that I will mention is that I have just left recorded feedback on your thesis statements on the discussion board. If I didn't miss anyone, I replied to each of your thesis statements and recorded myself explaining my thoughts on what you could do to improve your thesis. A couple of people are basically right where they need to be, and I only suggested very minor tweaks. But I would say most people have at least one or two kind of bigger things that they need to change about their thesis before it is fully ready to go. If you make those changes that I suggested and want to get an extra round of feedback, just shoot me an email with your thesis statement and I'll try to get you some more feedback as quick as I can. With that being said, though, let's go over what we're doing in week 5. So, of course, as per usual, you'll see all the tasks that we're working through this week. We have a bit of a summary of what we'll be doing here. Let's go ahead and go to task 5.1. 5.1 is a few different readings that you can do. As per usual, again, there's not an assignment that goes along with these, but these will help make some other things that we are doing make a little bit more sense. Our textbook, in my opinion, does a very good job of explaining things and providing really helpful examples. So I would take a look at these sections. Now, task 5.2 here, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this than I normally would because there's a lot of information here. And I'm guessing that there's probably a good number of you who haven't done MLA citations before, or maybe it's been a very long time. So I am going to dwell here for a little bit before we move on to some of the other tasks. First of all, MLA stands for the Modern Language Association. And this is just one of many different citation and formatting styles that exist. There's also AP, which is Associated Press, APA, which is the American Psychology Association. Harvard has their own citation style. And so this just happens to be the one, MLA just happens to be the one that is most often used in English classes and writing for literature and English studies. Now, MLA calls for you to cite your sources in two ways, and you're going to need to do this in this upcoming paper in Writing Project 2. First of all, you'll need to cite your sources within the paper itself. We call these in-text citations. And then you'll also need to cite your sources in what we call a works cited page, which will be down at the bottom of your project. And so that's what all the rest of this information is about. It's just walking you through how to do some of those things, going over some examples, stuff like that. Here you'll find a note that indicates you should only really have 3 sources for this project. One is going to be your lens text, so either Kilborn or Katz. And then your other 2 sources are going to be your images. That's really all the information that you will be drawing from. So you don't need to have any other sources. You don't need to do any outside, what we call outside research. You're just going to be citing those 3 things. But it is important that you cite them, and which include your images. You need to cite your images because if you don't, it's considered plagiarism. Plagiarism is it's when you take someone else's ideas or words and don't properly give them credit for it. And I believe a little bit later on in the term, we'll go into a bit more depth with plagiarism. This is just a little bit of an intro to it now. But if you do plagiarize, there can be some pretty bad consequences that go along with that. So that's one of the main reasons we want to make sure that we cite things properly. And also, it's just a matter of, making sure that you give credit to the people that deserve it. When you do something, You want to, you want to make sure that people know that it was you, and you don't want people, stealing your ideas or using something that doesn't belong to them. Which is why, at least in English and really all of academia, we take citing sources really pretty seriously. So our first section here is in-text citations. Again, these are going to be the ones that happen in your essay itself. And the first thing here talks about signal phrases. Now, a signal phrase is a phrase that signals where your information is coming from. Because if you don't have a signal phrase, sometimes it can be a little bit unclear about where you are getting your information. But I can probably best illustrate this with an example. So here we have a sentence. Jean Kilbourne, a media critic, says in her video Killing Us Softly 4 that women are often objectified in advertisements. Your signal phrase here is this portion right here. Now, not all signal phrases are going to be this long. For instance, a signal phrase could be as simple as just she says or he argues, something like that. But typically, it's a good idea to add a little bit extra information to your signal phrases. That way, it is giving your reader a better idea of where you're getting your information from and how you are using that information. So here, this signal phrase tells us that the information is coming from Jean Kilbourne. Who is she? Why is she someone that we pay attention to? Well, she's a media critic, and specifically, we're getting her information from her documentary "Killing Us Softly 4." So that gives my readers an idea of where this idea comes from. This isn't my idea. I didn't come up with it myself. Instead, I got it from Jean Kilbourne. And there's a little bit more information here about that. You'll see this bolded thing here, present tense. In MLA, we refer to our sources in present tense. So notice that it says Jean Kilbourne says, not said. It's a very minor thing. It's a little bit of a nitpicky detail, and there is an explanation for it. But I don't want this video to be any longer than it needs to be. So just know for now that in MLA, we typically write in present tense. Moving on here, if you are going to quote from a source, it will look a little bit something like this. So Kilbourne says in her video, so that's a signal phrase. It's telling us where the information is coming from. That ads have, quote, long promised us a better relationship via a product, end quote. So we have our signal phrase and we have our quote. And this is doing something very important, which is this quote isn't just what I call floating by itself. A lot of times I'll see students just sort of throw a quote into the middle of a paragraph, and that quote won't be connected to their own words. Quotes, at least in MLA, almost always need to be connected to your own words. So here we have the writer's words in the quote, and they all flow right together. This is what we call a parenthetical citation, which is another word for an in-text citation. Parenthetical just means in parentheses. And now this is actually, you don't technically need to put the title of the video here. You can, it's not a bad idea. It's always better to be as specific as you can be. But because in your paper, you'll only be using one of Kilbourne's sources or one of Katz's sources, that means that you don't really need to specify the title in parentheses. If you've done MLA before, you may know that this is often where you put a page number. Of course, these are videos, so they don't have page numbers. But this particular writer chose to put the title of the video in parentheses just to be extra clear about what source they were using. And again, there's some more information here that you can read on your own. I don't want to dwell on this too much. Our next bit here is referring to your images. There's a couple of ways you can do this. One, you can just refer to the ad by its name or by a short description of it. So for example, here we have the ad for extra gum portrays a stick of gum wearing a bikini. And that makes it clear which image you're referring to. And that's probably the safer and certainly more descriptive way to go about doing this. What you can also do that many of my students have done in the past is you can label the images. So you're going to have the images in your paper, and underneath it, you can put, image one, Nike ad, image two, Adidas ad. And then in your paper, instead of saying the name of the ad over and over again, you can just say image one, image two. And that also works fine. The important thing is just that your reader knows which image that you are referring to. Okay, moving on. So that was all about in-text citations. We're now going to talk a little bit about works cited pages. Your textbook has plenty of examples of works cited pages. You can take a look at those. On your works cited page, again, you're only going to have those three sources. And this is how you cite Kilborn and Katz. These are the correct citations for both of those documentaries. For this project, I have no problem with you just copying and pasting this into your works cited page. This is kind of our intro into citing sources. So I'm going to help you along a little bit more than I will later on in the course. And here we have this is kind of the formula that you would follow. Title of film, the role. So for instance, the role here created by Gene Kilborn, production studio, and date. And then you'll also be citing your images. And I'm pretty sure everyone is using images that they found online. So this is the formula for citing an image from the web. You're going to do the name of the product or the company. You're going to provide a short description of what the ad is, the date that the ad was published, and that means when did the company release this ad? A lot of your ads you may have found on like Pinterest or on a blog, or you might have found your ad like in an article online. You are not looking for the date that someone else published this image. You want to look for when the company itself released the image. That can be a little bit tricky. You may need to poke around a little bit, but do try to find when the image itself was first released. Let's see here. The name of the host site, so if you got it on, I don't know, let's say Forbes or BBC, just throwing out names, that's where you would put the name of the site. You'd put the URL. If you're not familiar with that term, this up here in your browser search bar, this is your URL. And then you're going to put the accessed date. This means the last day that you went and looked at this image. So if I last looked at one of my images today, June 22nd, I would put 22 June 2020. And then we have an example here for you to model yours after. And if you need some more help with all of this, again, you can take a look at your textbook. There's also an MLA citation guide here provided by our library. And then also the source that I actually use is this. I type into Google OWL MLA, and then it'll be your first result here. And this is by Purdue University. It's their online writing lab. And down the left side here, let me close out of this video. You'll see links to basically all the MLA information you could ever need, more than you could ever need. And I like how this is organized. It makes it easy for me to find the info that I need. So there are lots of sources available to you. This just happens to be the one that I use. Okay, I think that pretty much covers it for task 5.2. Let's go ahead and move on to 5.3. Task 5.3 is just writing your draft. By this point, you've done a fair amount of brainstorming, pre-writing, outlining, a lot of thinking about your draft, so you should be in a pretty good place to begin working. If you feel like you need some extra help, you can always go to the online writing center, which can be found through NetTutor. They will be more than happy to help you with that. Let's go on to task 5.4. 5.4 is just asking you to think about how you're going to be designing your document, which again is thinking a little bit about MLA format, and you can read some things here about that. And then also talking a little bit about including your images in the text. Task 5.5 is peer review. For Wednesday, you're going to be posting your draft of writing project 2 to the discussion board. Now, it's important that you post a complete draft. So it's allowed to be rough. It is a rough draft, but I would like it to be a full copy of your paper. And the reason for that is if you give a peer reviewer, or even me, because I also take a look at your drafts, if I or one of your peers is only looking at half of your paper, then we're not able to give you the best advice that we can. You will always get better advice from your peers if your peers can see the totality of what you are trying to accomplish. So I will take some points off if you don't submit a complete draft. And then, like last time, you should go through and claim one of your peers' drafts. What I mean by that is you'll go on the discussion board, you'll find one of your peers' drafts, and you'll just leave a quick comment, say, hi, I'm going to read your draft and give you feedback. And that way, you are letting other people know that they should not read this person's draft. Uh, in order for our peer review activity to work the best that it can, we need everyone to have at least one partner. And that is more likely to happen if people are choosing peers that have not yet been selected by someone else. So when you go on to choose someone's draft to read, try your hardest to pick someone who doesn't have a peer review partner yet. Last time we did pretty good with that, I think, but I think we have some room for improvement. Now for Friday, you're actually going to be doing the peer review. And there was some confusion last time. Here you have some prompts. I want you to respond to all of these prompts. And it would be helpful if you bullet pointed them the way that I have here. That makes it easier for me to find the information that I'm looking for. And even if you think your peer hasn't done one of these things, you should still write something here. So for instance, let's just use this one as our example. This asks, is the opening engaging? Well, if your peer doesn't have an opening to their paper, obviously you can't provide them feedback on it. But I'd still like you to write something here. You can just write, my peer doesn't have an intro yet, so I couldn't provide feedback. And that way I know that you did all that you could, that you looked for the intro, you tried to provide feedback, you just couldn't. If you don't provide an answer to all of these things, you will lose some points. Also, I'm going to be looking to see that you go into a pretty good amount of detail here. Short little responses to peer review aren't really going to help anyone. So this is a good time to really view your peer's paper critically. Now we don't want to be harsh. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But comments that say oh, your draft looks good. I think you're good to go. Can't wait to read the final draft. That's not really going to help them improve their paper. Um, so use whatever intuition you have, use whatever writing experience you have, and try to provide the best feedback that you can. And this is sort of a mutual trust thing. Try to provide the best feedback you can to your partner in the hopes that whoever is reading your draft will do the same. It's a really good opportunity to help other people out. Let's see here. I think that's all I need to say about that. Task 5.6 gives you some guidance on editing and revising your paper. This video is specifically about qualifying a claim because our claims are not always going to be 100% accurate in 100% of all situations. Sometimes we are conditionally correct. That's what it means to qualify something, is to put limits on something, to acknowledge the shortcomings of something. This video here says may, probably, sometimes. So you will be arguing about your images. You won't be arguing about all images necessarily. And you can't necessarily say, my image always will make women feel insecure about their bodies. You just can't prove that. So instead of saying, these images will always make women feel insecure about their body, you could say, these images may make women feel insecure about their body. But you watch this video, it will talk you through a little bit more about what I mean. Task 5.7 is actually that's the besides your final draft of writing project 2. This is the main piece of writing that you'll be submitting. This is a you'll just be reflecting on the writing process and on the feedback that you received. I think that this is an important part of the writing process. It's usually not enough to just write a draft and be done with it. It's usually good to sit down, think about the choices that you made, think about the feedback that you received, and that's likely to make the things that you learned. It's likely to more likely to make those things anchor into your mind to kind of build a solid foundation for future learning and growth, which is why we do these reflective sort of assignments. Your last two things here, you'll be submitting task 5.7. This is worth 10 points. Notice that this is not where you're going to submit your final draft of writing project 2. You'll submit that here. So you have two different submission pages. Make sure to keep those straight. One of them you're submitting task 5.7. The other one, this one, you're submitting writing project 2. They are pretty clearly labeled though, so I don't think you should have too many issues. I think that is all that I need to say for now. I hope you found this video helpful. As per always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions that I can help you with.